Hi, my name's Gareth Tissington. You can call me Tiz. I've been in web development since 1998, and yeah, I'm aware that's a very long time. I'm currently the Associate Director of Global Digital Marketing for AECOM. I'm going to just recite the boilerplate here. We are the world's premier infrastructure consulting firm, and we employ nearly 50,000 people globally, and I wonder how many of you have actually heard of us. Oddly, my title internally in the business is still full stack developer, and you know what? I'm okay with that because that's exactly what I am and it's exactly what I love doing. When I first started to design websites, it was all tables and Perl scripts, and with some painstaking Photoshop image slicing, I made some good graphical sites that won some awards. I started delving into Flash to make things a little bit more graphical, and that was when I became reliant on XML. I started becoming very interested in back-end services from PHP that provided dynamic XML data to my Flash sites. By the way, I know Flash is universally hated, but I'll hold my hands up and say that I loved it. Absolutely loved it. ActionScript was great, and I still mourn its demise. Anyway, I'd become pretty fixated with what I guess we would now call a headless data approach. I started working with Node, Mongo and Backbone, and I found that working with enterprise APIs like SharePoint and Wordpress were a real pain, as they were predefined and often quite poorly designed. I found that more often than not, if I hadn't developed the API myself, the work to get what I wanted out in a concise manner was often too much to maintain and scale at an enterprise application level. What I needed was something quick, secure, and easily consumable. The main problem was that designing those simple APIs took quite a bit of time, even though it was well worth it in the end. So, I moved to AECOM, I moved into marketing, something I hadn't really done for 20 years, but the same complexities remained. There wasn't a single point of truth for anything. I started using Angular and React, but I still needed data endpoints, and now I was dealing with Adobe and Salesforce. Still equally as bad in my opinion. I struggled on, and it was a struggle, until at the end of 2018 I came across something that really caught my eye. Strapi. I couldn't quite find the right project for it to start off with, but in early 2019 I was asked to make an app for some awards. I opted for a React PWA. I also decided on Strapi, as this was my big chance to use it in anger. Strapi was still in beta, but I had the system up and running locally in a day. I configured the REST to kick out everything I needed in one call in another 2 days. I'd never used Strapi before until this project, but I was flying. The front end was a breeze, and I had a functional application working in 7 days. The next opportunity to use Strapi came almost immediately after. I'd been asked by a client team to create a UX design that essentially converted an environmental impact assessment for a road that was planned to be upgraded near Stonehenge to a digital. It was a pretty big deal. EIAs are very long and complicated documents that are usually delivered in bound books that can contain thousands of pages. It had never been done before, the project would be very agile, it also contained potentially gigabytes of data. The one thing that was the easiest choice in the whole project was Strapi. We could rapidly change and develop the content types. Most importantly, we had a JSON content type that we could store geospatial information in a standardized format, GeoJSON. We could customize the API response so that we only got the data we needed in the right calls. The site had to be fast and there was a lot of information. So we created web workers to download the bulk of the info to the local cache in the background, whilst using the main thread to grab the info people were actually using in order to make the site, which actually after a lot of compression, contained only around 250 megabytes of data, seemed very responsive. As far as development was concerned, it was agile and we were delivering working versions of the site constantly to the client, so we could just clone Strapi at the touch of a button, branching the dev and the data so we could keep working on another version. I think this portability is one of my favourite things about Strapi. You have a data structure locked in, and just by copying the API folder to a new instance, cloning the MongoDB and copying the uploads, you're working on a new version instantly. The dev work we did on that project and the choice of Strapi as the data provider meant that we had the basis for a product in about 6 months, and it was a pretty complicated product. We had the server set up from my original awards app, and we pushed a blank Strapi structure to a Bitbucket repo and wrote a shell script that pulled the React front end and created a new digital EIA ready for data entry in minutes. The only thing we found during that project was that the amount of data and the relational content types, Strapi got complicated. It was overwhelming for a non-technical user, but actually we already had a solution. Strapi offered authenticated access controls, and whilst the API was open for read access, it was so easy to configure for the authenticated write access. User authentication was built into Strapi, so after a couple of weeks creating a front end, we actually had the basis of a front end spatial CMS. What we have now is a reusable Strapi instance and several flavours of Gatsby front ends. Both are ready on Bitbucket with default content and configs added in. We need the default content as we now use Gatsby and GraphQL. I now have the problem of GraphQL needing a typed schema, and despite creating schema values for 90% of the content types in Gatsby, I still haven't got round to making the files work. If anyone has any thoughts on that, please let me know. We have a MongoDB that can be cloned from the server with our default content ready to go, and we now have a couple of front-end branches that perform different functions that are all connected to this one Strapi microsite boilerplate. Again, we have a shell script that creates, clones, installs and configures the Strapi and the Gatsby files on the server, and we have an Apache web server, also on the same virtual server, ready to serve the preview site. I originally went headless because I wanted an agnostic data source, disconnected from the various front ends I might need, be those internally or externally facing, things like Power BI dashboards, intranet sites, even ingesting Markdown from Strapi into Adobe InDesign for project content, something I am investigating. The fact that Strapi has the ability to utilise both GraphQL and REST also granted me another one of my wishes. It meant that my data was easily accessible, from anywhere. A lot of the content we produce in a company as big as ours has dual uses, both for client external marketing, but also for staff awareness. Using REST along with GraphQL, I could have the best of both worlds. My intranet sites could pull campaign data from the Strapi site via secure REST, and I could use the GraphQL to provide an approved content I wanted for external use. This meant that even if my project hadn't been approved for external use, I could still host it in the same place and surface it for internal use. This had an unexpected benefit, as once my internal stakeholders saw the project listed for internal use only on our intranet, they quickly got the client approval needed for us to push it externally, which, as it was all in one place, was a real breeze. The more development I did, the more I realised that what I'd hit upon was the perfect approach for so many reasons. I loved React, after Flash and of course Strapi, it just made sense. But I had to consume APIs using REST, and this meant loading. And SSR React seems to be spoiling a little bit of the magic. However, for marketing sites, I needed amazing SEO and performance. And this is where another great feature of the fully headless and static site approach really shines for me. Now, I have security. By using Strapi and Gatsby as a static website builder, I now have SEO, I have performance, I have API accessibility, and now I have security. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but as a Fortune 500 company, we still use WordPress for our main website. And one of the biggest headaches with that is obviously security. By using this platform, I have a totally separate preview site on an Apache web server on the same server as my Strapi instance. Using the Strapi webhooks, users can build previews, clean the Gatsby instance, and publish the Gatsby instance to a very simple Azure app service. The app service is just a scalable web server, essentially a glorified CDN, nothing more. And once that's published and public facing, it's as secure as the sites I was building 26 years ago. There's no link back to my data, and republished new versions can happen in seconds. The final benefit from this approach is literally one that came to mind last week, and that's sustainability. The site I'm currently working on deals with AECOM's move to become a more sustainable and ethically responsible company, and it dawned on me that the approach that I've taken, and obviously my excellent dev skills that make the final published sites about as sustainable as a website could get. It's being served as HTML from a pretty dumb web server, the DB is only accessed on build, not every time someone visits the site, and my virtual dev server sleeps when it's not in use. I'll hold my hands up now and say that there's still a little bit of work to be done on reducing the bundle size, so this version probably isn't the most sustainable that it could be, but I am getting there. I think this approach is pretty much as close to perfect at the moment as it could be. But more importantly than anything, I don't have my single point of truth. And surely this is a cardinal sin for me if you've been listening. I'm about as miserable about that as I am with the fact that I still haven't moved the company website away from WordPress. But I am trying, and my first job is to transition our thought leadership platform away from WordPress. I remember the day in January 2020 when I had my global team all in London for a dev meeting about this massive task and what a huge problem it would be to bring this platform and everything we wanted to do onto Strapi. We had some great dev diagrams, some big dreams, and then the shit hit the fan and there was a big global pandemic. But actually the work I've been able to do in my little incremental versions of the microsite platform have made this task seem a lot less daunting. With the separate microsites I now have and the many different flavours of front ends I have all connected to a unified backend, pulling all this so it runs on one Strapi doesn't seem like an impossible task. In fact, it seems like quite an easy task. I know there'll be issues, but I'm not really that fazed by it. In the next 6 to 8 months, I'll be using Strapi as part of the main AECOM web estate, and my grand plans of having all of our marketing collateral in one place will start to become reality. And best of all, that one place won't be WordPress. Cheers, Strapi.